Hello and welcome to the MLS UK show, the final episode of 2023. This is Stoppage Time. I'm Henry Hewitt, and as always, I'm joined by
Elliot Holman. And if we wrap this up really quickly, it's because I'm in a freezing cold room. It's so cold in England. If you're listening in the States, we've got the worst wind and like wet weather, and it's grim, really grim.
Yeah, the biggest problem I've got is that my bin, my garbage can, I guess it would be, trash can in the US, is going to blow over at any point because they've took the rubbish, they've took the trash, but now it's an empty bin in the wind. So if I've got to rush off, it's because I'm looking down the street and I can see my bin rolling away. But I think that is not a metaphor for our 2023, is it? Because personally, me and you, we've had an amazing year. We've both become dads for the first time. And, MLS has understandably, I hope people would understand, become second nature to us, even though it has been such a probably the most talked about year in MLS history.
Yeah, it's strange, isn't it? Looking back, it's loads of new people have joined us and probably think this is how we normally do things, and it's not. We've just been extremely busy, and luckily, when Henry says that we're taking out the trash, don't worry, that doesn't mean that they've introduced relegation to MLS. Toronto, you're safe. Colorado, you're all right. Dare I say Miami?
Well, I think they'd be, even if they introduced relegation and Miami finished bottom of the league, they would find a way to keep
just
Miami.
let them stay.
Yeah. Oh, we'll do it next year instead. But I think
an eighth DP. Yeah, sure.
But I think with MLS's attitude towards US Open Cup this week, it looks like the traditionalists who maybe would want promotion and relegation are not going to get it anytime soon. Which is a whole different story, and we'll talk about that a little later on. But I guess if we're looking back at 2023 in MLS, there's one man who we need to talk about first, and that is Lionel Messi. It seemed for months and years that every now and again on this show we'd go, oh, Messi's been linked to MLS. Wouldn't it be great for the league? Wouldn't it be this? Who's he going to go to? Probably Miami. And then it'd die down, and then it'd come back again. Well, eventually in July or June it happened. July he had his debut. Lionel Messi joined Inter Miami in MLS. Now we're coming out the back of a season. What do you think his impact has been on the league?
How do you even measure that? I think you have to give him a whole season in terms of Miami's achievements. So they literally won 6 home games with Messi. Like Messi's on their roster and they won 6 home games in a season. Like that. That's not the vibe that he's gonna bring next year. Guarantee that. I think you have to measure it off the field, if anything. And we don't have to look too far from home. Like just look at our stats. Like we've been so busy this year. We've both had babies and had other priorities, and yet still like this has just been a mad season for us, like people discovering the league. I went to my work Christmas party the other day, and I was speaking to somebody at the bar, and there's somebody quite high up in the company. I don't really know them that well, and they said, Elliot, and I was like, yeah, this is really awkward, I don't know who you are. Shake your hand. I listened to your podcast, and I was like, this is weird. Really into American sport, wanted to get into MLS, discovered our podcast, and then met me. How weird! Like it didn't go, oh, that's Elliot's podcast, I'll listen. And they discovered the podcast, and then when I turned up at work, they were like, wait, what? So I just think Messi's impact, silly little stories like that, just tell you the ripple effect that he's had.
Yeah, we're seeing so many kids now running around on playing football on parks with Messi shirts on, and the impact is there, and I think it's great for the league, and it's been great watching him. Okay, we've not seen him much in MLS. I can only think of a handful of games he's actually played in MLS. Obviously, the game at Red Bulls where he scored and did that assist is remembered, but other than that, I think they were looking at next season, weren't they? They wanted to bring him in for the Leagues Cup. They wanted to promote that. It was Messi's tournament. If you asked me to remember many games other than the Inter Miami games in that tournament, I can't think of many off the top of my head that go, oh, well, that was amazing, or that was great. It was Messi's tournament. Obviously, they won it. And then I feel after that, they were like, right, okay, let's just settle down. I know he was carrying a bit of an injury, so let's just now, you know, let him be around the club, let people see him. But next year is the year for Messi, and I'm fascinated to find out next year how Inter Miami do. Naturally, they'd be favourites to win it with Messi there, but I think just seeing his impact in the Leagues Cup. I mean, what was it in the end? 10 goals he scored, including that free kick on his debut. I'm not going to say he's going to do that every game, but if that's the impact he can have in 6 games, then over a 36 game season, 34 game season, they've got to go in as favourites.
I think as well, one point to make is today we've been in our new house like 5 years, so I don't know why I called it a new house. But just looking through the memories of that, I'd sent you a picture of somebody walking past when it was like new and like freshly built and we just moved in. Somebody walked past in a Red Bulls shirt, and that was obviously 5 years ago. That was such a big moment that I had to run to the window, take a picture and send it to Henry and go, someone else knows about MLS. Whereas now, like everywhere you go, there is an Inter Miami shirt. And I think that's, we're moving. Like this league is moving. I'm not moving. I'm staying in this house. 5 years.
And that's, you're seeing kids wearing Miami shirts. You're seeing more MLS. People wearing MLS shirts about, we both send pictures to each other all the time of when we see, like, I know someone wearing a Portland shirt or someone I saw in Manchester near me with an Orlando bumper sticker, it is, you just see little bits creeping in. And of course, Miami are going to be the team, just like LA Galaxy were when Beckham played. But, I think this is it, is that people, especially in this country and in Europe, are now going to be like, oh, Miami, Messi, I'll watch some of that. And then that's where you get introduced to these other teams and the fascinating nature of MLS and the little quirks that the teams have. And then you might go, oh, well, okay, Miami and Messi, great. But actually, I quite like this thing. I quite like RSL, or I quite like Vancouver, and I'm going to support them instead. So, yeah, he's great for the league. I can't wait for next season. Inter Miami obviously win their first tournament. Almost got the double with US Open Cup as well. You're an Orlando fan, so I'm sure you deep down you don't want Inter Miami to win that much. But if Messi stays, and this is a whole different conversation of rumours going on elsewhere, but if Messi stays for the next 2 years, could we see an era of dominance from them?
I think the problem is if Messi stays, the pressure is then put on the league to I say allow. I don't want to get into that, but for other teams to start getting big players as well, like big players for big money, and at that point, it won't just be Miami. If Portland are allowed to bring Neymar in, and obviously Neymar is like a Galaxy player. Like I don't know, that just makes sense to me. But if Galaxy get Neymar and Portland, get to bring in a Rashford, and I don't know where I'm pulling these from. Montreal get a Bruno Fernandes. Like it becomes a different conversation altogether. I think that's what we need to use Messi for. Like a period of dominance won't do MLS any good, and I say that if it was Orlando, the beauty of it, the conversation that I had in a bar in Birmingham the other night was about how good it is that next season no one really knows what's going to happen. Columbus are probably going to be quite good because they've held on to players, but are they going to win MLS Cup? Well, probably not. It's really, that's the appeal of the league. So I think it's important that we try to keep to that. You don't want to just... Also, I think even Miami fans probably agree that it feels like it's been a little bit set up and they've shoehorned them all into Miami. You don't want a period of dominance off the back of that. You want to go and do it on your own. Original teams like Chicago, San Jose, they want to go and make an impact on the league, and they should be allowed to go and get those players as well. So let's use Messi as a springboard to just make the league better overall.
Yeah, and there's strong rumours as we record this on Friday, the 22nd of December, that Suarez could be the Luis Suarez could be the latest name to join them. And the thing is for me is that MLS, and this shows the fact that no team has retained MLS Cup since LA Galaxy, 2010, 2011 was it? It's so difficult to do. It's difficult in all leagues. It's difficult in Europe. You've got to do it over 38 games. But I think with the travel, with the playoff system, with all this stuff built in, it's so difficult to have that era of dominance that you look at a team like LAFC, who have won it and then got to the final again. Toronto a few years ago did something similar. Seattle, these teams that don't win it twice but go, MLS Cup to MLS Cup. That is probably the closest we're getting at the moment to an era of dominance within MLS. So Inter Miami, they've got the players. I mean, those players are older players, so whether they can do, all those games and then playoffs in quick succession, we don't know. But it's still going to be difficult for Inter Miami to do that. But we'll wait and see. They're obviously 2 years away from retaining MLS Cup. They've got to win it first. It's gonna. I'm sure the league would love to see Messi with MLS Cup, but as we've seen this year, is that teams like Columbus who maybe will go under the radar for people who are outside the league looking in, they become the best teams because they are the best teams.
I think what felt like a bit of a moment for me was when the Super Draft happened the other day, and I don't want to say I didn't care because I love the concept of the Super Draft, but obviously the teams at the bottom get the first picks and it works its way up. And I just thought teams like Inter Miami finishing down the bottom now, if they've got just insane amounts of money to spend and seemingly unlimited roster spots and like rules, and the Super Draft is them getting what would have been like the third pick in the Super Draft for finishing third from bottom. It's just not as, there's nobody in the Super Draft that's going to play ahead of Messi, or Robert Taylor, who's come into his own, anyone, Suarez. It felt like a bit of a sad moment to me. And it seems to be a little less important. And I know a lot of those kids that have been drafted are actually just going to go back to school for a year. So they're going to be stashed away for another day, which again, it just feels like the league's definitely moving. It's definitely moving. The Super Draft used to be pretty integral. And just last year, Duncan Maguire was drafted, just remember. And, for example, because Orlando, but he has generally been one of the best draft picks ever in MLS history. And I just think there's not many players like Duncan Maguire are available in the Super Draft, and there's none that are going to play ahead of Messi.
Yeah, you can look at it two ways. I'm sure if you asked every player that was up for a draft, the vast majority would go, I'd love to play Inter Miami because I get to play with Messi. But, you're training with him, but you're not going to be playing with him, or you're not going to be getting him a team ahead of him. So I think it's probably the mentality, really. You either have a mentality of, I get to say I've played with Leo Messi and then I might have a few years and then whatever. Or you'll get people that are like, no, I want to be the first in the draft pick. I want to play for, it ended up being Toronto, but I want to prove myself, and I want to play against Messi, and I want to show what I can do against the best ever player that there's been. So I suppose it is all down to mentality, I guess.
Yeah, I agree. And I just think we need to enter a new era with Messi now. We need to kind of he's here and he's perfect and we love him. And let's ride it. MLS was already turning. The tide was already turning for MLS. It was already going in a really good direction. Let's use Messi even more and turn this league into something even more incredible. Who knows? Maybe New York will even have a stadium at some point. Unbelievable.
Hey, we can all dream. Elliot. Right, let's have a look at the Eastern Conference then in 2023, because there were loads of stories away from Inter Miami and Leo Messi. Just to go down the table of how it finished. Of course, Cincinnati won. They got Supporters' Shield. Orlando in second, the best ever performance from Orlando City. Then you had MLS Cup winners Columbus in third, Philadelphia in fourth, New England fifth, Atlanta sixth, Nashville seventh, New York Red Bulls eighth, Charlotte ninth, Then you've got the teams that didn't make the playoffs: Montreal, NYCFC, DC United, Chicago, Inter Miami, and Toronto FC. I suppose we've got to start with Cincinnati, the best team in the regular season, deserved Supporters Shield. Acosta got MVP. It was almost a perfect season for them, wasn't it?
Almost, and they deserved it. 2 points per game they averaged is huge. Is huge. It's fantastic from them. I kind of wish they'd have done the job. But I loved. We've discussed on previous episodes. I loved the way that Columbus went about and played their football. I think Cincinnati were a bit more like Orlando, in which they just got results. Columbus did it in style and deserved to win. But Cincinnati, it's an incredible story. And if they'd have won MLS Cup, it would have been a documentary on Apple TV, showing the day that they expanded into MLS and finished bottom and finished bottom and finished bottom. And then all of a sudden, a wonderful story. They were fantastic, beaten at home twice, was it? Off the top of my head. I that doesn't happen often. It's really, really, really fantastic effort, and they were extremely unlucky not to go all the way.
Yeah, it's funny. I saw Yap Stam on UK TV the other day, and it just reminded me, oh yeah, he was Cincinnati manager, and that's it. They've just moved on, and they've gone. I wouldn't say they went in but like they needed to go an extra gear. They needed to get a whole new gearbox. They needed to get a whole new car, and they went from bottom to. Like last year, they did very well, and we were sat there going, "Can Cincinnati win MLS Cup? Can they do it?" And then, obviously, they didn't. And then it came to this year, and even in our predictions at the start of the year, we both said that, like, I think one of us, I'll have to listen back to it, but one of us said Cincinnati for Supporters Shield, and we kind of went, "What?" And we were like, "Well, actually, yeah, they can. They've got a really good team. They're doing really well." And we smashed it. And it was a shame to see them not win MLS Cup in the end. We'll talk about the playoffs later on in this episode and about how that ended for them. But, they had, it just all clicked for them, and they were a very good team. And now it's all about how do they react to it. Acosta signed a new deal in September, so you'd think that he won't be going anywhere. They've got there's still a great roster. They're going to add to it. Can they go again next year? And can we've looked at Philadelphia in recent years and gone, well, they've just missed out and they've been so close. Cincinnati don't want to be one of those teams. You don't want to be a team that wins Supporters Shield but never wins MLS Cup. And I'm sure they want to go one better.
Yeah, because you just immediately think of Philly. Looking at Philly in fifth off the back of, some really, really successful seasons, and just, not a surprise to see them in the top five, but maybe a surprise to see Cincinnati above them and Columbus above them and Orlando above them. And Houston now up there challenging them, and you just think it's very easy to win the Supporters Shield and then not quite ever get across the line.
Yeah, exactly. And Philadelphia, I mean, this just is so much praise for Jim Curtin and Philadelphia, and what they're doing is that this season for me seemed a bit of a reset season for them, and he's still finishing fourth in the conference. That's a reset season for Jim Curtin's Philadelphia.
I still think, we've talked about this, that the East was so much stronger than the West that it's almost a caveat. So you look at Philly in fifth, well, they still would have finished second in the West, and so because I think LAFC finished just above them overall. So I think there's still that element to look at where, so they lost out to LAFC last year, thanks to Gareth Bale, who just turned up and went, I'm going to win them this and then retire. I think, Philly, if they were in the West, would have been a real force this year. So, Jim Curtin's always had them playing the right way. The junior side of Philly all the way down to the under nines, all playing that same way. It's all geared up perfectly for them to go that extra step one day.
It is, yeah. A club that need to go a few more than an extra step. They need a new gearbox as well. Before we talk about how our teams did in the conference, let's have a look at the bottom end. Toronto FC had an absolutely dreadful season. So much was I mean, they're a team really of individuals, aren't they? And a lot was expected of them this year. It just never happened. They finished bottom of the conference, and they really need a reset next year. Obviously, Herdman's come in, so they'll be hoping that he can take the success he had with the Canadian national team into MLS. It's just been to use a car analogy, it's been a car crash season, hasn't it, for Toronto?
Gearboxes, car crashes. Toronto are a team that we're used to having up there, used to having in MLS Cup, like some epic games. And I just think to see them play 34 games and lose 20 of them is just, it's baffling. And it was from if you go back a couple of years, it was from that new setup where Bob Bradley was going to be doing everything, all singing, all dancing, behind the scenes, on the touchline. It just did not work out. And I kind of look back at the Greg Vanner years and think, why make the change? Why all of a sudden was it that Bob Bradley was brought in and then given completely free reign? It just has not worked. And I mean, the goals they conceded, the amount of goals, when you look at them, like the manner in which they were losing, there's so much to do there. There's so much work to do, and getting a couple of draft picks early on is it's just not gonna help. But it's no longer an advantage. You don't want that wooden spoon. We talked about it with Cincy before, like, oh well, at least first pick in the draft and they can just completely change their roster and go again. That is what Toronto need to do, but I just feel like it's so much deeper than that.
Yeah, well, you mentioned Bob Bradley there. Michael Bradley's gone as well. The Bradley family has left Toronto. Maybe they were the problem, like a neighborhood. That one family in the neighborhood who are a bit rough and a bit like Sid from Toy Story. Maybe the Bradley family are like his family, but and maybe it could be brighter skies ahead for Toronto. But they definitely need it. Bottom is not good enough by any stretch of the imagination. They've got in the players they've got there should be doing much better. I know the roster is seen to be a very lopsided. You've got a couple of very good players, and then you've got poor players, but you'd like to think they'd meet in the middle, and in the middle should be a lot better than where they finished. I tell you what then, let's move on to Orlando City. Second best regular season you've ever had. Couldn't quite do it in the playoffs, but Pereira's just signed a new deal. I always ask you at the end of each season about where's your head at with Orlando, with the head coach, with what you're doing. You didn't start this season very optimistic. Have you ended it in a much more positive way?
Yeah, but to the point where it's almost really frustrating because we didn't start well. The reason that I wasn't happy at the start of the season is because we weren't winning games. So to look at this, to look at the stats now and see, Orlando finished 3 points off Columbus, who won MLS Cup. To think that we spent so many weeks of the season trying to get going. There was a point even halfway through where we won twice as many games away as we had at home. Like simple things like winning home games we were struggling with. So really frustrating to see how far they managed to get despite that. But if you were to turn that around and take that as a positive, fantastic. Surely because of the terrible start and then the really good rest of the season, surely they must have the best form out of anybody, like from that last period of 30 games or so. So you have to take that. There's been a few players leave, but Pareja staying gives a bit of stability that Orlando have never had. We've never had this before. So let's see what happens next.
You mentioned there about a few players leaving. Rumours have started about Torres maybe going over to Europe. Obviously, Maguire's happy where he is, and I don't think he'd be going just yet. How important is it to keep that sort of forward area of the pitch? Because I know the defence has always been, for me, quite solid, especially the last few years for Orlando. But now you're seeing at the top end of the pitch stuff starting to happen. If you start next season with those two in particular, would you be confident that you can go that extra mile and get to, Supporters Shield or MLS Cup?
Well, I have confidence in the scouting team and the front office that if Torres was to leave, I think he's a fantastic player. I don't think our whole season depends on him, if I'm honest. So I think if he was to leave and they got good money, then I think it would be spent well. But we've already lost. The captain's gone. We've lost, a centre back as well in Antonio Carlos. So I think there's already work to be done. You don't want to be losing too many. So I think starting the season with Maguire, with Torres, hopefully a new centre back to replace Antonio Carlos, somebody to a DP 10 to come in and replace Mauricio Pereira is vital for me. And they'll be there or thereabouts if they can do that.
So let me move on to Atlanta then. I think it's the second season that Atlanta haven't finished above Orlando since we've entered the league, which is a shame. But I will allow you. You've not had many this year. You've kind of shelved it, but I'll allow you that famous phrase of yours if you want to celebrate that fact.
Well, I'm a father now. I'm much more mature. I just think it's only the second time that it's happened. I don't want to, get ahead of myself. I want to try and keep level-headed and get in. Come on, get in.
The MLS UK show OGs are all celebrating with that. I think if you'd have just tailed off that and gone, no, I'm not going to say it, everyone would be like, no, it's Christmas. Give us a get in. But yeah, Atlanta, if you'd have asked me before the season, where would Atlanta finish in the conference, I'd have probably said about 6th. So as expected, no consistency. The home form will always be quite good. Away form, I mean, let's face it, going into the playoffs, I don't think anyone... I actually felt that I was quite confident it would go to a third game, but then I didn't think we'd get anything from Columbus away twice. But positives, Giakoumakis, really good season coming into the league. I expected a lot from him. One of my mates, John, he's a Celtic fan, and he watches the podcast as well, so hi, John. But he was saying that... Giakoumakis will do well in MLS, and actually quite a few Celtic fans wanted him to stay. Almeida, top assist maker in the league, young player of the year. I'll be very surprised if he's still there at the start of next season. So I think this sort of transitional period for Atlanta is continuing, and I don't know. I don't think we're anywhere near the glory days of Atlanta and the way that team played and winning MLS Cup. I don't think we're anywhere near that. At the moment, yeah, I'd probably say next year will be another season. Playoffs, but 6th.
I say this not as an Orlando fan, but just as an MLS fan, just looking back at how things used to be. Like, do you remember the social media for Atlanta? It was mad. Like, they'd get off the bus and it'd be like, the Kings are here. Like, it was just like, I don't want to say arrogance because they were good, but like it was a time, and now it's actually quite funny to look back on. Like, and it just shows exactly what we were talking about before and how things change. MLS is always different. If this was like most other leagues in the world, Atlanta would still be up there or thereabouts, and maybe they'd have a challenge from Columbus one year, or LAFC another year. But things change, players move on. Almada's definitely gonna move on. There's no way he stays. Giakoumakis, easy for me to say, is interesting because whenever I've watched him, he's not been good. But obviously his stats, like I've seen he's scored goals, so that's an interesting one for me. And I kind of put him in the Pookie bracket, where I'm interested to see next season, like what happens there.
Yeah, whether we can do it again. I mean, for me, I think Giakoumakis is a goal scorer. If he don't score, you're not going to get that much from him other than that. But that's what Atlanta need, personally. I think you need players around him that are going to feed him the ball. And for Giakoumakis, he could have a quiet game, but if he scores you a goal at the end, then he's done his job. So, it's going to be interesting to see next year if he can follow it up, a bit like Mukhtar's done this year, and hopefully he can do for Atlanta, and, we can push on. But, as I said, I think 6th. But we'll wait and see. We'll see what the winter holds for Atlanta. Right, before we move on to the West, let's kind of look forward then a little bit. And there's a few teams that are going to be having new head coaches in the East next year. Of course, DC and Montreal and Red Bulls haven't appointed new head coaches yet, fully. You've got New England have just appointed Caleb Porter, lots of MLS experience there. We've mentioned Herman at Toronto. In terms of then, well, let's talk New England Revolution first with Porter. MLS experience, MLS Cup winner twice with two different teams. Is he exactly what we need, or is this just like, because Bruce Arena's in that sort of same mold? What do you think? Would you have gone slightly differently, or was he the guy to get?
No, I'd hire Caleb Porter. Absolutely. You'd have to talk to Portland fans to tell you why you shouldn't. Maybe Columbus fans, but I feel like Caleb Porter is a really sensible hire. He's been there. He's done it. We talk all the time about MLS experience with players. I look at Portland now with Phil Neville in charge. Well, who would you rather have, Caleb Porter or Phil Neville? I think it's a really solid. They've got a good team. They started really well. They had a good season last year. They've got potential, New England Revolution, to be a real, really big deal in MLS next year. And Caleb Porter, you're not going to lose 5 games on the bounce with Caleb Porter. I can hear that echoing into eternity. I can hear it being played like next season, but it's not going to happen.
No, he's got that MLS experience that is vital, because I know we kind of joke about it, we say it a lot, but this is a unique league. This is why we look at Phil Neville, for example, and go, okay, he's had experience at Miami. He's stuck around and did some punditry work with Apple TV after being fired by Miami, but still, he's like, how much. Like, you need that experience. You need to know the league, and Caleb Porter does that. And it's no surprise that every couple of years you'll get the same names winning MLS Cup, because they know what they're doing. They know how to do it. They know how to deal with playoffs. They know how to deal with having to go and play away in a different time zone on a Wednesday evening. So I agree. Porter, he knows MLS, and I'm sure New England Revolution. A few tweaks they need to make, but I think they'll be quite a force next year.
Yeah, I agree. I think they're one of those sides that when you look at the roster and you look at their history, they just need somebody in charge who knows what they're doing, and they're always going to be there or thereabouts.
So DC, Red Bulls, and Montreal are on the hunt for new head coaches as we speak. They haven't appointed anyone. I know a few of those are on the verge of appointing, and there's rumours that they are. So, but having a look at 2023, much of the same for most of them. Red Bulls showed a bit of more promise, possibly. Montreal just missed out on the playoffs. DC, just with Rooney, just had a dreadful season. I think all of those teams will be looking to get into that playoff bracket next year, won't they?
Yeah, playoffs is... Especially now, there's so many spaces. Playoffs is like the minimum target for any team. I feel like there's no one so cut adrift that they shouldn't be making the playoffs. So that has to be a realistic target.
So let's move on to the West then, and I'll run down the table first before we talk about individual teams. Of course, St. Louis City, what an inaugural season it's been for them. They won the conference. Then you got Seattle in second, LAFC third, Houston in fourth, RSL fifth, Vancouver sixth, Dallas seventh. SKC in 8th, San Jose 9th, Portland 10th, Minnesota 11th, Austin 12th, LA Galaxy in 13th, and Colorado in 14th. You got to start with St. Louis City, haven't you? What a first season they had. And it surprised us all. I'm sure people on the inside, maybe the Taylor Twellmans of this world who know a lot about St. Louis might go, no, we expected this. But from us on the outside, the fans have been incredible. The football's been incredible. And... they did so well in the regular season, got to playoffs, and they just didn't show anything, did they, in the end?
No, disappointing in the playoffs, to be honest. But I think I don't mind telling you, I didn't expect it. I expected them to finish second from bottom. That's just me being honest. I don't enjoy telling you that, but I just didn't expect it. It wasn't a roster that was packed full of stars or even anyone who really had ever proven anything in MLS. And actually, in what it has been a weak year for the West, that's not to take anything away from them, but they would still have made playoffs absolutely in a really strong year for the West. But in a year where Seattle only won 14 games and finished second. They really shone. They really stood out, and they kept quite a fair amount of clean sheets. They certainly scored a fair amount of goals. They were miles ahead of anybody else for goals. I think maybe Vancouver are the only team who got close to them goals, and LAFC. But I'm really, really impressed with them, and I'm excited to see what happens next. Do they stick with what they've done? Do they start turning down the opportunity to sign a Bruno Fernandes and just saying, no, it's all right, we've actually got somebody from the Swedish second division? What happens next? I'm excited. I'm on board. St. Louis, congratulations.
Yeah, incredible season. I think you got to look at Austin as, are St. Louis going to do an Austin where they have such a great season and then, bad luck with injuries, not quite get the players in that they needed to, maybe not strengthening certain areas and end up finishing nearer the bottom than the playoffs. Hopefully that doesn't happen, because similar to Austin, St. Louis have a great fan base and they're very, you look at the colours they've got, you look at the stadium, they've got everything there to be very likeable and a great advert for MLS. But for me, they've got some very good players. You look at the likes of Lewin, 14 assists. You've got João Klaus, 10 goals. They've got the players there, but of one or two injuries in the wrong places, you do then look and go, are they going to drop next year? So hopefully they can recruit well in the close season, and carry on this great adventure they're on, because I would love to see St. Louis get into the latter stages of the playoffs, because we said actually with MLS Cup, when we were doing our MLS Cup predictions, I don't like I said, we both kind of thought, I don't think St. Louis are going to do much in the playoffs, but if they'd have got to the latter stages, and then if they'd have, which they would have, I'd have to check the points, but I think they would have ended up hosting Columbus should they have got to MLS Cup. That'd have been a fantastic MLS Cup. That'd have been amazing. So yeah, I hope one day they can get to MLS Cup and then continue what they're doing.
Yeah, and that's the thing. It's continuing it, isn't it? We've spoken about it already on this podcast, on this episode. It's hard. It almost resets. You don't really get much of an advantage from finishing top of the Western Conference going into next year. There's not a lot that comes from that, other than teams like LA, teams like Seattle, teams like Portland, who have got big history recently, go, well, I don't really like what you've done there. You've come in and blown us all out of the water, and they're coming after you. So, and it can all turn around very, very quickly.
Yeah, speaking of turning around very, very quickly, we go to second. Seattle are back. It just didn't feel, I know they won Champions League last year, but it just didn't feel right, Seattle not being in the playoffs and not being at the top of the conference. They got second this year, much better from them. Obviously, in the playoffs, they lost out to LAFC in a quite a tight sort of game. Could have gone either way. When Bouanga scores the winner, I think that shows where both those clubs are at the moment. But Seattle much better, wasn't it?
It was. Just a strange era of Seattle last season. Really, really bizarre. Obviously, Portland were down there as well with them, and we were kind of wondering what was going on in Cascadia. But Vancouver are back, and Seattle are back as well. And second in the West for Seattle. Pretty standard season for them. That's kind of what the level that we're used to from them, not them sort of languishing around the bottom. And they'll come back next year, and I imagine they'll be favourites. They'll definitely be one of the favourites to win that.
Yeah, because you look at LAFC, I know Collini is retired. There's a Bouanga, obviously. Again, he's in that bracket of I wouldn't be surprised. Actually, I would be surprised if he was still in MLS at the start of next year. So LAFC may be in a transitional period. I think that's it for the West at the moment. You look at the fact that St. Louis won it, and that's no disrespect to St. Louis, they did amazing. But the fact that a new franchise came in and won the conference tells you where that conference is at the moment. And I do believe that it takes one team. Just one team needs to stick their head out further than the rest, and then they can dominate the Western Conference next year, and Seattle will be in that bracket of teams that will fancy the chances of doing that.
You're right about the West. I think Houston deserve a mention because of they won the cup, and they finished fourth in the West. That's that's big. It's a fantastic season by their standards. Let's be honest. We've been doing this podcast a long time now. We haven't seen that. We haven't seen Houston up there. And I just, on the other side of that, I know we're going to come to it, but I just look down the bottom and I see LA Galaxy, and I just think in one of the worst years for the West ever, you finished 13th. How? Why? What is going on? Losing 14 games, only winning 8. Most of those, of course, would have been against Western Conference opposition who are not as strong as those in the East. When you look, imagine if they were playing Cincinnati, Columbus, Orlando every week. It could have been even worse. So yeah, strange season in the West, really strange.
Yeah, you look at LA Galaxy and you look at Houston. Houston, for me, they've got good players. Obviously, Herrera. They've got Bassi with a top goal scorer with 10. Bird. But it seems they're a proper team. They're sharing everything about. The top goal scorer with 10, and then the rest of the goals are being shared about. And this is a team. I think they scored 10 more than Seattle in the end. So they were scoring goals, but they're just more there for each other. And you could sense that in the playoffs, the fact that they got so far on, grinding out victories and stuff. They just look like a unit that has been built. Whereas you look at LA Galaxy, and it's Groundhog Day again for us talking about LA Galaxy. At the end of every season, we have a joke at the end of every podcast, give us 5 stars rating, because LA Galaxy aren't going to get that 6 star anytime soon. And it's just a complete mess at the top of the club. And it goes all the way down. And LA Galaxy, yet again, just repeat what I've said in previous years. They've got an important close season coming up. They need to recruit well, blah, 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 blah. They never do, and they end up finishing in similar positions, or they end up getting knocked out of the playoffs in the last game of the regular season because the mentality's not there to get over the line. So, disappointing for them. But, I mean, Houston, US Open Cup champion, they went to Inter Miami and won it. They've had Houston was similar, where at the end of every season we'd go, oh, what now for Houston? Well, same again next year, try and not finish bottom. They've turned it around so much, and they changed the head coach. But this is surely what sides like LA Galaxy should be looking at and going, we need to do that. We need to just reset, start again, and build a team that wants to play for LA Galaxy, because he's such a big name within the footballing world. We want to play for LA Galaxy, invest in the team. They've got the fan base there. Everything's there. It's just not working again.
Yeah, I can't think of a player that wouldn't go and sign for LA Galaxy if they were coming to MLS. If Messi would have signed for Galaxy, no one would have been surprised. It's a name. It's a heritage brand. It's synonymous with stars, and they really should not be down there. One thing that you said that I want to pick up on, they scored 10 more goals than Seattle. It's a really good spot, by the way. But one thing that's really made me laugh is they conceded over twice as many goals. It's just a really, really poor season from LA Galaxy. And I really hope that we see them back on top soon, because if it wasn't for history books, we'd just presume that they're just an awful club.
Yeah. It's funny, isn't it, how, we've been doing this podcast for like 5 or 6 years now, and we were saying, Toronto, we expect them to be in the playoffs every year, and people who've been watching MLS for longer go, I remember in Toronto were like the old FC Cincinnati and just finished bottom every year. Then, it does. Everyone has the turn in MLS, and that's what's great about it, but we've not seen LA Galaxies. That was before our time, and I don't think it's going to come back anytime soon. I tell you what, let's round off the West. Let's talk about Minnesota, because Adrian Heath gone. It's a new start. This guy was head coach since they came into the league. Pookie's there now, so they've got that striker who was starting to show glimpses. I think a full season will be better for him. What do you think for Minnesota? Because they started off dreadfully, let's face it, when they came into the league. They've picked it up. They've been consistently playoffs. Last few years has dropped a bit. What do they need to do, and where can Minnesota go? What would be a good season for them next year?
They have to be back in the playoffs for me, because they they soon established themselves as a a pretty stable side. Came into the league with Atlanta, and Atlanta took all the headlines. But since then, they've been pretty strong and stable, and I think they belong in the playoffs. I honestly think if you take Messi away, Pookie has to be one of the best signings of the season. I think any team in MLS would want him. Like I know he's come from Norwich, and I know, like, obviously I have an affinity with Timu Pukki, but I mean his stats speak for themselves. You're getting a championship Premier League player. I mean, he scored 10 goals in the Premier League just a couple of years ago. I think it's a fantastic signing. We're looking at the team that finished top of MLS, top of the West. Their striker got 10 goals. Pukki was getting 10 goals in the Premier League. Like, this is a huge signing. He's not getting any younger. He actually looks like Klaus as well. They're basically the same person. But I think if you get the team right around him, I feel really strongly that it's a fantastic signing. He's already proven he can do it. He's scored 4 goals in one game. I think when it comes to Minnesota, you have to start ensuring that you've got the right players around him. There was a lot of talk of players not wanting to be there, wanting out. That needs to be sorted, of course. And a new coach will come in and hopefully reset all of that. And I think they make playoffs.
Yeah, I agree. And I think most Cincinnati fans, most Minnesota fans, most Cincinnati fans would not be happy with just making playoffs now. But most Minnesota fans they'd look at that and go, let's start this upward curve again. Again, great club, great fan base, great stadium. We love seeing them sing Wonderwall at the end of the games. There's a lot to like about Minnesota, and I just feel they've kind of last few years drifted a little bit, and they've just become another MLS team. So hopefully they can turn it around next year. I've just remembered this, of course, before we move on. And Columbus fans, I know you will be watching and going, why have you not talked about Columbus? We won MLS Cup. We're saving the best till last. But before we do, Chris Armas is back in MLS. He's at Colorado. He's had his stint in Manchester, and he's now come back to the league. Are you excited to see him back?
Yeah. Dreadful manager, isn't he? Dreadful manager. And when you're Colorado and you finish bottom of the West, one of the worst Western conferences there's ever been, and your saving grace is you've appointed Chris Armas. It's going to be a wild ride in the West with Phil Neville taking on Chris Armas, just in a battle to be a former Manchester United coach who's doing a terrible job. It does not excite me in the slightest, and I just don't know why he continues to get jobs.
I'm just looking at his Wikipedia. I forgot he was at Leeds as well, wasn't he? He went from Manchester United to Leeds, but we saw him at Red Bulls, and he did it kind of okay, but that was just after a strong period for Red Bulls, so it was made to look worse. Then went to Toronto, did very poor. Then we went to Manchester United as assistant, and we were kind of laughing on this podcast going, what is happening at Man United? Why are you getting Chris Armas there? And he became, I speak to my friends who are Man United fans, and he was just known as the guy with the iPad, and then he was the guy with the AirPods at Leeds. He's just that guy who was there next to the head coach. Going to Colorado, let's face it, with Colorado, they can't do much worse than the last few years. They've been very poor, so maybe they're looking at it someone who has got MLS experience again, who knows the league, so maybe they can turn it around. Do I think they're going to get to the same point as where they got under Robin Fraser? No, but can they just scrape into the playoffs? Maybe. We'll see.
That's a big call.
I said maybe. That's me being optimistic, Colorado fans. But I think he'll be given more time at Colorado than he was at Toronto, for example.
Yeah, I agree. I think if you appoint him, you have to have some kind of belief system that's going to give him time and give him a lot of help with roster as well. But the West is wild West at the minute. If anyone wants to just have a go at being good, it'd be fantastic.
Right, just to round off the West, I mean, Portland fans, we did speak about Phil Neville on the last episode, so go check that out. Our opinions right at the end of that episode on how we think Phil Neville is going to do in MLS. And that leads us on to our MLS Cup champions, Columbus Crew. They beat LAFC 2-1 in the final. And I mean, Columbus scored 2 goals early on, and LAFC had parts of the second half, but it was quite a dominant performance, wasn't it, by Columbus in the end?
They stuck to their guns as well. They stuck to the way that they want to play. They hosted MLS Cup. They said, you come and play us. We're going to play around you. We're going to play out from the back. We're going to play intricate tiki-taka football. And I'm absolutely here for it. I love what the coach is doing. I love that they've retained most of the players that they need to continue to play that way. I hope they get to add some more exciting pieces as well if the roster will allow. Fantastic. One of the best MLS sides that we've seen. Hands down, 100%. Okay, weren't massively challenged by some of the teams, mainly from the West, but also in the East. I just look at Orlando finishing third and think, well, it can't have been the best year if Orlando are up there. But I really think there's no way that they don't, come really close to replicating what they've done this year again next season.
Yeah, Cucho smashed it. Great from him. They've got a good squad. Nagbe as well. They've got a good manager who it just fit. Everything fit. He came from Montreal last year, and we said on the podcast, how's he going to do? Is he going to? We've seen this before. A manager does well. For one team, he doesn't quite work for another. Columbus saw what has come what has happened with Wilfred Nancy, and they've been the best team, well deserved to win in the end. And it's that momentum, that second half of the season momentum that took them to this journey. Cincinnati probably better. You could say yes, definitely better over the course of the whole season, but Columbus post summer just steps it up, and then they went into the playoffs with form. Knocked Atlanta away, and they then got to the semis. The conference final, but technically the semi-finals, I guess, for MLS Cup. And that game against Cincy, they were 2-0 down. They were dead and buried, and they've come back and won 3-2. And I think that shows that the mentality in that team, and it shows that when it's not over till it's over, and that is such a great habit to have. Hopefully, we can take it into next year, because now you go from being sort of, I don't want to say the underdogs, but the team that are chasing. They've always been chasing. Even that Cincinnati game, they were chasing a 2-0 defeat. Suddenly now, they're at the front and teams are chasing them. So how can they react to it?
Yeah, spot on. That's what's exciting though, right? I think when you know that some of the weaker teams are going to get a chance to go again, and they will come again, and Seattle proved that, had a little year off, had a little blip. I think when you look at the fact that Columbus are going to come back strong, but hopefully so are LA Galaxy, and hopefully so are Toronto, and hopefully so are Minnesota, and you're going to get a real competitive edge to this league. Miami, of course, as well, are going to be right up there this year. So they definitely make the playoffs, and so that's definitely a space that's gone already. It's going to be really, really interesting.
Can't wait. 2024. We're days away from 2024, but we're a few more days, a month or two away from MLS 2024. We've got to talk about this as we end this review of 2023, and this is what's happened in the last few days. US Open Cup, MLS have said basically that they're not going to participate. They're going to send the next pro teams instead. US Soccer have now come out and said, well, you can't do that. That's not down to you to do that. It's just become a total mess. We've not spoke about it on this podcast yet, but what are your thoughts behind it?
I understand the business decision from MLS, but as a fan of football, it's a tragedy, isn't it? We love cup competitions. We love the idea that any of the USL sides can go to an MLS side, and maybe if they have an off day, can catch them. It's like the beauty of the FA Cup, isn't it? Which is coming around very soon in January here in the UK. I love the US Open Cup. I love it for that reason. MLS is just getting to a point where it's getting, throwing its weight around a little bit and saying, well, we don't want to dilute our product. We don't want these other sides getting involved in us. We want to go and play our big money matches with teams in Mexico, and because that's theirs. They own League's Cup a little bit, whereas playing in US Open Cup, it doesn't have huge financial implications for MLS, and it's another game for teams to play. And so I get it, but also it's just not acceptable. It's a bit like the whole Super League, European Super League thing as well. It's like, no, the reason things have been done this way for years is because it's the right thing to do.
Yeah, and I think soccer in Europe's a lot different to MLS, and I think there's more heritage, I guess, in Europe with these teams that are 100, 150 years old. MLS obviously owns the league and a lot more than, say, the Premier League does. The teams are more individual, whereas with MLS, the players are owned by the league, for one thing. So, yeah, I guess MLS can kind of do what they want in that sense. But, it's... I believe that in everything, whether it be soccer, whether it be life, you've got to move on and you've got to adapt, and you can't just stick doing the same thing over and over again. But, I guess these cup competitions, in a similar way to the FA Cup, they're not just about MLS teams. You've got these USL teams, USL2 teams, all these teams that are involved in it who, their players get to go and play at these stadiums. These players get to go and play against MLS players. And I don't think for 1 minute Lionel Messi's going to play for Inter Miami in the US Open Cup unless it was the final. But still, they get to play good. They get to challenge themselves. And sometimes it's much more than just, MLS. It's about the bigger soccer picture. And I think MLS at the moment are looking at how do we develop this brand across the world. They're kind of forgetting that, if they can develop players in their own country, that's better for the US men's national team. And then if they go do well in the World Cup, that's better for US soccer. And part of that is developing these players who are going to be playing against the top teams, who might then get a transfer to a Columbus Crew or a Cincinnati or whoever. And it comes from the US Open Cup. So, yeah, I was disappointed to read it. I can understand it from MLS like you, but, yeah, not for me. Not for me. I'm glad US soccer are kind of fighting back, because if MLS clubs did leave, they're just going to do their own cup competition, which would just be pointless. So they might as well stick where they are.
Yeah, agreed. There's always a bit of give and take, right? Sir Alex Ferguson used to send his England players to the international break and try and dictate how many minutes they could have, and everything kind of works. If you can make it work together, everybody takes a little bit of success from it, like you say, with the World Cup coming up. And MLS doesn't have the right to start dictating what US soccer do in anything. And MLS is a very, very, very wealthy business at the end of the day, and they've got the US soccer to thank for that along the way. So hopefully this gets resolved, but I can kind of see it from both sides. But also, it is just a bit morally wrong.
Yeah, exactly. Right, now before we go, what's your 2023 highlight watching MLS?
Watching League's Cup with my newborn daughter. Born the day before it started, and Orlando were in it for about 3 minutes, but I enjoyed that. It's also the first time that we've had a bit of a break in the season, for that, and also Apple TV is a real highlight. Please spread the games out a little bit more, but other than that, so good. It's so good for us in the UK. I understand if you've always been able to watch games fairly easily, it's maybe different, and maybe you're having to pay a bit more or what. For us, the ability to be able to pay to watch any MLS is just like mind-blowing. So that's also been a massive thing.
Yeah, echo that with Apple TV. I guess with my son, I putting the Christmas tree up while watching MLS Cup. That was nice. He was in his cot, in his bed, so he didn't see much of it. But I'm sure he enjoyed hearing Jake Zivan call it with Taylor Twellman. But yeah, I think for me, highlights, you've got to look at those big moments. Messi's goal, to beat Cruz Azul in the first game. Since Cincinnati Columbus, I just think of those moments that me watching it make you want to pick your phone up and go on Twitter or go on in whoever, TikTok or whatever, and talk about it and go, oh my God, did you see that? Like me text you and stuff. So yeah, you look at those moments, and those are the two moments for me. So it's been a great season. Next year, hopefully it'll be even better. And yeah, we see a full season with Leo Messi, and there we go. We've started the episode with Leo Messi, and we've ended the episode with Leo Messi.
And that's probably how every episode will go next season as well, because you can't not talk about Leo Messi. It's going to be an incredible watch next year. And we hope you come back and share another season of MLS with us.
Yeah, thanks so much for sticking with us this year. We genuinely mean that. It's been a very stop-start year for the podcast, and we've done so much in the last few years and since we started, and I know you're used to us putting out episodes every week and stuff like that, and it's been difficult for us to juggle that, especially with us both becoming fathers for the first time, which again is really weird how we sync that into one season. But just little moments like winning silver at the best podcast at the Football Content Awards, which is voted for by you guys. The guests we've had on, and being able to say we've had the likes of Taylor Twellman, Bradley Wright Phillips on, Nigel Reo-Coker, Gillian Sakovic, who also has just had a child, so congratulations, Gillian. Jake Zivin, and there's others that I've probably forgotten about but have joined us on the podcast. We've done so much this year despite the fact that we have been busy, so thank you so much for sticking with us. If you have enjoyed this episode or any episode across the season and you want to leave us a rating on your podcast provider, Elliot, there's one rule and one rule only.
LA Galaxy style, 5 stars only.
Yes, and that will continue into next season and probably the season after. If you're watching on YouTube, please like, subscribe, click the notification bell as well. That really helps. We hit 1,000 subscribers. I think it was March time. We're now approaching 1,500, so it's rising. So thank you so much for that, everyone. And our last thank you needs to go to our sponsor, soccer90.com. Remember, at Soccer90, all the new MLS jerseys will be there when they get released next season. And if at the checkout you type in MLS UK, you get 20% off too. So, Elliot, I guess our last thing to say is Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. Thank you for your support once again. And when does the season start? Come on, I'm waiting. I'm ready.
Let's get through Christmas first. I've been Henry Hewitt.
And I've been Elliot Holman. Thank you, guys.
See ya.